respiration. What's the other one?
Soil respiration.
Respiration, that's right. They do have storage capacity also. Not
Yeah, maybe
incorrect.
that's what the next one was.
Not incorrect. However, photosynthesis, respiration, transpiration, take it right off my first slide in the presentation. Leaves definitely have storage capacity, but the focus is on other things, and then the movement of those things into storage in stems or roots more often. Want to make the best use of all that expensive surface area for gathering sunlight and using that for food production. So, now, of course, with exceptions, right? There are definitely leaves that are storage. We talked about water storage, I think. Just has a question about like a succulent, like an aloe or something like that. But think about those other main three: transpiration, respiration, photosynthesis. Okay? Turning light into consumable energy for the plant. So left off here on leaf hairs, just like root hairs, their epidermis, right? It has the combined functions of some protection, more humid localized environment, and a relationship to how much water is lost through the leaf. We're about to move here to some examples of leaf specialization. Got a few questions in the hallway or in the lounge about this, so hopefully I can help make sense of it now. So this is to say that within the same plant, the same individual, you can have different arrangement of cells within the leaf based on the location, whether it's in a sunnier spot or a shadier spot, which, sometimes that's like top down, it depends on where exactly it is, if it's a vine, right, where it's sticking out or whatever, what kind of things are next to it. But the general concept is that the structures change in their amount, in their location, in order to facilitate light absorption in a certain location and to reduce the energy required for making a functional leaf in another location if it's not going to be a good location to make a bunch of food, do a bunch of photosynthesis.
So with this, we're talking about long term in the shade? This isn't like a
Yes.
throughout the day.
Yeah, so let's talk about like a plant in the environment outside, and the top of that plant is readily exposed to the environment, can be in direct sunlight. Right? But then, a few nodes down, the next set of leaves, 3, 4 sets of leaves down, are now shaded by all those ones above, right? So maybe they get some lower angle light off the side, or there's a certain time of day where that's exposed a little bit more, but on a whole, it could be something like overall light absorption capacity might be 10 times more here. I mean, it could also be just like twice as much, but the point is that there is a difference, and that impacts the structural makeup and the survival strategy of putting things in a specific place for that plant. And to get specific, talking about the shade leaf now, which, again, same species, we're talking about this one on the bottom. First thing you notice here, it's not as tall, right? Top to bottom. Flatter. How does that help? A little louder?
So the sun can penetrate more into the, deeper into the leaf.
Yeah, not as thick so it can get through. Exactly. Likewise, more lateral surface area, so that's its opportunity to catch light. Whereas here, because it's already in direct contact, it doesn't need that. And so what happens in the shade then is you often see a larger leaf because it needs that extra space if it's going to be effective at grabbing sunlight somewhere. So it's larger. It has fewer chloroplasts, and to my comment just a moment ago, no sense spending energy to make these organelles that grab sunlight when there's no sunlight. So to a point, right? So it's not no chloroplasts, it's just fewer chloroplasts. And that's exemplified in this comparison by the single layer of Palisade mesophyll in the shade plant, shade leaf on the plant versus the double layer of Palisade mesophyll in the sun plant, right? In the sun leaf on the plant, excuse me. So the ones that are getting more sunlight have more of the structures that are set up to absorb sunlight, right? It seems logical. So here, there's literally twice as many as here, right? And so we expect to see fewer chloroplasts in that single layer, more chloroplasts in the double layer, because even that second tier down in the direct sun leaf is going to have more solar input, more energy absorption opportunity than this one that's, you know, down here, shaded near the base of the plant. So fewer chloroplasts, fewer hair, thinner, you mentioned that, I think that was to Akash's point, thinner. The mesophyll is less defined, right? There's less of it, it's more spaced out. And fewer hairs though. What's up with that? So we just finished with hairs on Monday. We talked about some of their function. Why would that shade leaf not getting as much sun not need the hairs? Christopher?
It's already in a microclimate by the top foliage, so it doesn't need to create a microclimate, maybe.
All right, is it?
Like
Is it not
So we had an end to.
It doesn't need to, transpire because it's in a lower area, there's not as much sun to dissolve the water.
Yeah, exactly, right? So that by being in the shade, it's going to be less susceptible to that direct sun drying out, and so that additional humidity effect from the hairs is less necessary. Likewise, Christopher's point is also correct in that that risk of now these hairs are preventing photosynthesis, right? Maybe they're reflecting it, they're definitely covering the leaf to a certain extent. Don't want that when we're already desperate for what we can get, right? We don't want to compromise any of that because of the limitation to begin with. And then was the third hand in the back?
No, yeah, I was just gonna say something.
Indeed.
I got a question. So, I understand the difference between the top leaf and the leaves underneath it. I'm trying to figure out, not trying to sound bad, but how is this important? How do we apply this? How does this knowledge of what the leaves do under? We can't control it.
Oh no?
Well, you could cut some leaves off the top, so more likely we'll do it.
You can move the light source,
Or that.
yeah?
You can use
You could tie that plant down, right? You could put a spreader in, you can move where that branch is, for sure. Let me get to more of that answer and see what Kalia's question is.
I'd like to, why isn't there more hairs than the other, I mean, wouldn't it's in the shade, wouldn't it need that water?
Well, it's not losing
so
water as fast.
Yeah, it's not losing water as quickly because it's in the shade. So
Okay.
that need to, all those strategies for conserving water are less important, not unimportant, but just less so, right? It's like, if I'm standing under the tree outside the door and you're standing in the parking lot on a sunny day, like earlier this morning, say, right, you're gonna get hotter faster than me, right?
Right.
And so if we metabolize the same and everything else equal, you're gonna need a drink of water before I do, right? Yeah.
So this lower leaf that's in the shade is what's the upper leaf? That was the change.
Yes, correct. Great point. Yes, exactly. So that one formed first, right, earlier in that plant's life cycle. And at that point, it looked like this. Right? And then later, when now maybe it's a foot or multiple feet down from that location, no need to produce that extra mesophyll, right, that's gonna absorb as much sunlight as possible.
So what happens to that mesophyll?
What happens to it?
Yeah, does it just dissolve into the?
Yeah, so it would be not exactly dissolved, but the pieces would get broken apart and used elsewhere. You know, and like, it would keep this, like, this whole one, you know, and so it's just that lower one. And maybe in some cases, it's just like, those things kind of do die off, and in others, they might be like, oh no, we need, those chloroplasts move somewhere else, you know, those proteins move to the next cells over, maybe they start ending up in here or something, and then they can be transported around Yeah.
all right, we're making more of a shade leaf this time.
Yeah, right. It'll lose some of that efficacy, right, because of the change. Now, like, whatever it is, a house got built right there, and now it's in the shade 3/4 of the day or something like that.
So if it started in spring, where it was the sun relief,
Mhm.
and then it gets shaded,
Mhm.
the rest of that season and into like summer, fall, it's going to still stay as that sun leaf. But it's just not gonna, like, the bottom layer of the mesophil, is just not gonna be used.
Yeah, it might be unneeded, it might be just less effective. But yeah, at that point, it's like, well, it's already made, so you might as well leave it here for now, and then, yeah, when it loses its leaves, next season, it's gonna rebuild according to that set of, conditions at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the flip side of this, right, is the sun leaf. Right? Smaller, thicker, more chloroplasts, more hairs. Take a look, you're outside walking around, even, there's something to be gained too. This is within a single plant, but from plant to plant, if you're walking in the woods and you look at like the canopy versus the understory strategy, right? You notice there's gonna be differences in the thickness of the leaf, in how hairy they are, in the overall size of the leaf, right? You can't evaluate from there exactly the number of chloroplasts, but you can notice, right, some different strategy between the two. Or, if you're like on the trail, the things that are immediately next to you are the shrubbier things, and they're sticking out for that light, right, that comes in the crease of whatever had to get removed to make that a place you could walk, versus 10 feet further in where it looks different. And how we can use this, understanding where the plant is expending energy to get light, right, has a direct connection to what I said about internode spacing. Why your internode is in a situation where the plant needs more light. And when you're in a greenhouse situation, any kind of crop that's grown in artificial conditions, right, you're thinking about how you can pinch or prune or maintain those internode spaces so that there's even light all around. If you're in a situation where you want to market that greenhouse plant, it depends on the market demand, but you may want, customers may want as many same size leaves as possible. And so then you need to try to normalize the conditions to be more even. Or it might be that the kind of like typical Christmas tree effect of wide and bigger on the bottom and smaller on the top is attractive. And so then you can use, right, what you know to get that different effect. You can, if you bring the light source closer, that's going to change it, right, to more stunted internodes versus if you pull it apart, for example.
I think this question was answered the other day, but I just can't remember. So the part in the middle of the leaf is the xylem phloem. Is that only going through the midrib, or does it also go through the veins?
All those veins
Everything.
are xylem and phloem. That is the vascular tissue. When you're looking at like the back of a leaf,
Yeah.
so it's just like, let me, my own marker that I just put somewhere, supposedly, so you're usually, right, the midrib is thicker, but all that means in this case is that it's a wider bundle of xylem and phloem at that stage. And then it goes to a single strand, and then from here it goes to a littler one, and a littler one, and a littler one.
And it goes through even all the little.
And that's how it reaches, so it's at least like 2 cells away from vascular tissue at all times. So it's an easy move to say, oh, needs more nitrogen over here, right? I can either dump it directly, or I just have to pass it through one more cell to get there. Yeah, so just like blood spreading to our own capillaries, right? We've got like big veins here, right? Artery that goes into a smaller one, that goes into an even smaller one. It's the same situation from like in a tree, from trunk to branch, or in the plant from main stem to shoot to leaf and beyond. Other specialized leaves, we're talking about shade versus sun. And now to arid regions, that means dry spots. We were talking about cacti related to stems, photosynthetic stems, and noted that the cactus spines, remember we're leaves, we call the things that are this on a leaf a spine, right, which serves for protection, serves for reducing that surface area for transpiration, so water saving at that stage. This one we mentioned already, water storage, you can see here, right, this is a leaf, so it's meant to be photosynthetic compared to this is the stem that's photosynthetic here. However, inside, filled with a lot of ground tissue where water has been stored. So not immediately transported in the xylem now, but transported into the leaf ground tissue, right, into the mesophyll so that it can be easily accessed when needed.
What would be the like benefit, the pros and the cons for doing this in this environment?
Well, I mean, the pro, it's right out there, right? You tell me, what is it?
It's, you have easy access.
Yeah, you got more water for later because the soil's really dry. So if you hold on to it yourself, then you have a supply. There.
Is there a reliable way to visually tell the difference between a stem and a cladophyll when we're dealing with succulents and cacti?
So,
You just have to kind of know.
do you mean between a
Like if it's-
spine and a, because the cladophyll is stem.
Oh, sorry,
You can
yeah,
part
I
of
mean,
stem.
like, but then you said last class, like with aloe vera, that is the leaf.
This is the leaf on this,
But then
like
with the
aloe.
cactus, the leaf is the spine, so like, how do you know when it's like?
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's challenging, but you try to go with the things we've identified already. So you could look at this thing and say, is that a spine, which is a leaf? Is it a thorn, which is a stem? Or is it a prickle, which is a epidermal growth? And right, the ID things we said there was that the stem tissue, the thorn, would have vascular tissue inside. The stem also has nodes, right, very importantly. So if you notice, right, like here, you have to be able to say that's the node and that's where the leaf comes out. Whereas in this case, this leaf, right, resulted from nodes here, but there's no obvious spot for that where stem meets leaf or stem meets shoot to produce something new off of this extension once you get beyond that connected to the base here. So you start trying to deduce from here back, or from the base out, and identify what's changed. Nodes are the first place I would look. Either you see them or you don't, and that's going to point you toward one or the other. And we didn't answer the downside of this water storage yet. Anybody? Good. What about the Samana?
There isn't any, it's spine itself.
Out here, there's relatively few, that's true, right? Zach's asking about this one, where there still are Samana, mostly on the underside. There was,
Is it because like animals and bugs will try to get the water in?
it's attractive, right? Everything that lives in that environment is under the same pressure of relatively little water. And so that's why this is getting protected here by spines. This has got some little ones on the outside, right? And this is relatively thin epidermis. However, certainly chewable by some, and that's going to be a risk.
Would that big compartmentalization really like, are cactuses very good at that? Because I was like, I know I've seen like on the flat plane cactuses, or the plane cactuses, I can't remember the name. Those ones like I've seen people slash them or whatever, and they seal up perfectly fine. With having that much moisture, you end up running into like an issue of just not being able to, like a rock or something like that starts, or is it? I don't know how good.
So like this is cracked open, now what happens?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the plant will start expended to absorb that water and store it, that's now, right, it's not paying off in that case. However, it doesn't mean that it stays open and it evaporates more, right, plus gets more disease or something. It's possible in the short term. Over the longer term, it's gonna seal that wound, close it off. That water up here will still be available. But yeah, that's, everything below here would all be a loss. So definitely attractiveness to, you know, anything else that's thirsty is a big one. Christopher?
I've noticed with aloe in particular, it's really easy to accidentally overwater it as a house plant. So that makes me think, in a natural environment, if like the climate that year was particularly wet, it could suffer because of just being so able to absorb water and not maybe get rid of it like you would like to.
Yeah, right? I mean, they rot pretty fast if you overwater. And that's true, right? You can get some, if it's really engorged, you know, then you can get some tipping, some lodging, that might lead to more cracks or more damage, which is absolutely true. Another one is the energy opportunity cost, right? The energy that it took to do that could have gone into something else. Could have gone into longer routes to find a little bit of water there is in that sandy soil, perhaps. Instead, it was spent here and now it didn't pay off. But generally, these are, on balance, these plants are doing so well at water storage that losing one, they're just gonna seal and go about their business, and it may not look as pretty, but overall, actual impact on later growth is minimal. If you start losing, you know, if it has 8 leaves and you lose 4 of them, right, that's gonna be a bigger reduction. There's a much bigger upside here to the water storage than there is downside. And again, even if animals ate half your leaves, right, you still got half with extra water that it's gonna get you further. Hopefully it gets you far enough, right? There's no guarantee that all these leaves get you far enough anyway, depending on the conditions, but you know, when you see it's bright green still, right, turgid, nice thick leaves, it seems like the strategy is successful. And the last one I haven't got to here is about the sunken stomata, which I mentioned as a water saving strategy on Monday when I talked about stomata, and I didn't get yet to actually showing the example. So here it is on the bottom of the leaf, right? Again, the opening is the stoma, and you can see direct air exchange with the inside of the plant. You can see looser leaf tissue here, vascular bundles present, some of that spongy mesophyll directly around, a lot. I see 3 layers in some places there of palisade mesophyll. That tells me it's a really sunny location for this plant. Likewise, I see 3 layers of epidermis, 3 cell layers on the top. So that thick epidermis also says intense sun, right? A lot of heat, a lot of potential for water loss. So it's both trapping it in with a thick cap, a thick waxy cap on the top, and creating a lot of space to absorb that light and use it. Meanwhile, the stomata sunken here rather than in the way I was portraying them in the example last week. Like if we took this leaf and we just say look at one side, I was saying here, 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 right? And it's a direct in or out for that gas. But in the case of a sunken stoma, that whole thing is recessed back in here to now, this is the spot where the guard cells open and the gas exchange could happen right here. So just like the epidermal hairs created that microenvironment a little bit moist around, this little space from here to here, right, it's gonna have a little bit more moisture contained here, and that's gonna mean slower water loss, fewer stomata opening in order to get CO2 in, but lose water at the same time. So it reduces that water loss by hiding them, right? You know, and again, the scale is small, so it's recessed slightly compared to the immediate surface of the leaf, millions of times over, it adds up to a difference.
So that accomplishes the same thing as the hairs, basically, but without affecting the photosynthesis as much as the hairs.
That's right. And so, yeah, and it does it here, a little bit moist, but likewise, there are plants that are using both of those strategies. You can recess the stomata, sunken stomata, and have epidermal hair here, and then now you're stacking the benefits of doing two of those into more moisture. And when sunlight is really intense, temperature is really high, like this leaf is indicating to us, doing both is a good idea. Of course, right? It takes some energy, you gotta produce all those hairs, right? But under those circumstances, usually worth it. Specialized leaves, right? Just like stems, we had all those modifications, different roles that we don't think of as the typical stem. Here too, reproductive leaves. Anyone seen this, like out in our greenhouse here, or in our house plants anywhere? Right, the little plantlets directly off the leaf. Very useful. You've got the site of all that food production right there, and you can just feed it directly in this vegetative propagation. Likewise, insect trappers, Venus flytrap, or pitcher plant. These are leaves. Okay? Leaves that have some attractive solution. Sometimes it smells like prey, sometimes it smells like food or something else, right? And it gets it in there. Likewise here, this is just a leaf. Again, some kind of attractant in the solution inside the pitcher. It slides down and then gets consumed.
On the Venus flytrap, what would be the prongs at the end? Would those be leaflets or lobes or?
Eyelashes. Yeah. Okay. What's that?
Fine.
Spines? So you're correct. So this whole thing is the leaf, right? So what do we call like the little edges that come off the leaf?
Would that just be the margins?
The margins? Yep.
I was gonna say, is that the same like the aloe as well as would be like a serrated leaf?
Yes. And so there, all these little triangles, right? So those here are like exactly the toothed leaf, right? And then the toothed edge is just like a little bit harder, just a little bit more epidermis, right? To make it like an actual like kind of bogey instead of just soft tissue there. It's an interesting question. And so here and here, right? These leaves have been significantly changed from the usual role of a leaf. Do you know why these things have evolved to have this leaf that's involved with trying to consume an insect? There.
Because they're usually in undergrowth in swamps where there's not really water life coming through, there are a lot of bugs.
That's right. The answer is that these things are found in environments that are generally nutrient poor, right? It tends to be like bog or swamp environment, nutrient poor, very low pH, which means even the nutrients that are present are less absorbable by the plants at low pH. And so you can't get as much of those important macronutrients, your nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, etc., from the substrate that you're in. They have to pull it in from somewhere else, and they're getting that from the fly or the mosquito or whatever, and consuming its body in order to then extract those same nutrients. So they adapted to the limitations of the situation by modifying the function. You can see this, you know, it's still green. There's like a little bit of photosynthesis happening, but nothing like in the majority of terrestrial plants because of the limitations of the environments where it lives. And
that imply like they have internal root hairs to like digest it and stuff?
So yeah, whether it's in the picture, sorry, someone was gonna respond about that?
I was just asking, he said that they have internal root here, I can't hear very well from the people that are speaking towards you.
Yeah. So how they get, right, the nutrients from that fly, say, I think is the question, right? So, it slides in, or it's pinched and trapped, and then there's, like an acidic solution, sort of like hydrochloric stomach acid for people, that starts to break it apart into component, proteins, and fats. And then, that slides down here internally into the absorption structure, which is effectively like roots, yeah, but pointed into the pitcher, or here, in the base once it enters. Christine, Andrew.
I should have asked, does that basically mean with plants like that, even if you tried to plant them somewhere and rich nutrients, good soil, things like, they would just die because they're not eating the way they're designed to?
Anyone have experience growing those?
They just won't produce as many traps, because they're getting what they need through the roots, basically.
Okay, so they can feed either way then? Okay, cool.
And if you overfeed it, or if you try to overfeed it with insects or whatever in a good environment, die, I guess, or well, or something.
It can,
Yeah.
the traps will eventually turn black and just fall off.
Yeah.
And so, it's an interesting question, because, right, the fact that they can do both then, right, it's a good adaptation, but it really points out how effectively they set themselves up for survival in a place where very few other plant species, right, are being successful. So it's more about, they can colonize an area where not much else can, and that gives them an advantage, right? No competition there, versus another location, right? They don't have a lot of leaves that are spreading, they're not really tall, so other things can easily outcompete them. But if you want to grow in like a 5.0 pH peat bog, then you've got a limited set of competitors. Good.
This might be going too deep, sorry, but how does a plant produce acid? That seems crazy.
Yeah. Well, for one, they're growing in an already acidic environment. So the water that they're taking up is already low pH, so they don't have to concentrate it very much to get it to the point where it'll start to break down other things.
So my other question is, would these plants be considered low pH plants, or is that just because of what they have?
Yes, yeah, acid loving, or,
I guess what I'm saying is, if they had a higher pH, would they process their nutrients, would they then be, I guess, a mid pH? Does it change from that?
yeah, I think that's kind of Peter's question. If they had better conditions, then, they could root better and get more from the soil that's there and depend less on this adaptation from, finding other consumable nitrogen in the environment. Great.
Do we know what kind of tissue actually activates the closing of the trap? Because there's another native plant that's not carnivorous, that when you touch it, it shuts. Is there a specific type of tissue that does that?
Good question. So I'm not a specialist in the mechanisms of these carnivorous plants, but like on the fly trap, what Jack was pointing out about the edges of the leaf, right, on the leaf margins there, it's just a pressure sensor that's basically like, okay, if this much pressure is exerted on the epidermis, to where then this much pressure is exerted on the ground tissue, then there's chain reaction that starts to move it there.
So it's not necessarily a specialized tissue, it's more so just the pressure?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can make a false closure, right? If you take like a pin or something and put it in the middle of that, it doesn't say not a fly, it still starts to close.
There's two hairs have to be activated. If just one is, then they won't close.
That's right, yeah, they've got a little redundancy built in. All right, and one more I want to mention on specialized leaves is bracts. These Sometimes you might hear them called floral leaves, but the point is, these are not flowers, they're leaves. Poinsettia is definitely our most flashy example, right? The bread and butter of the poinsettia is these bracts. So they're leaves. So all the things that we know about leaves, the photosynthesis, right? The makeup, right? In comparison to a flower. Oftentimes they're modified for color, right? They want to be big, they want to be attractive, and so what? To the question of why would they make a bunch of colorful leaves? Pollinators.
Reason a flower makes petals.
Absolutely. Again?
For some reason a flower makes petals.
That's right. And you're going to make leaves no matter what, because you're also going to absorb sunlight. Flowers are very specialized for reproduction. So if you could get pollinators in, right, by just the leaves, then you can save up that energy for maybe more flowers later, or sit through a challenging period of weather before you need to spend that energy. So there's a little bit of a backup plan there with using the leaves to do that pollinator attraction work. There's a hand up there. Done.
Yeah, how do you determine that that's a bract versus a leaf?
It is a leaf. We call those floral
Right, but
leaves.
I wouldn't call every leaf,
What's that?
I wouldn't call every leaf a bract. So
Every
where-
leaf is
where
not
are
a
we-
bract.
So where are we drawing the line?
Yeah, it is a bit of a gray area, but I think generally, location-wise, you see them right at the base of what's going to become the flowering part of the plant. And the real identifier is there's something distinctive about the color, the shape, patterning, maybe, series of colors, versus the rest of the leaves on the plant. All right, so that's the end of
I got one more quick question.
leaves, but yes, now it's.
So with the bracts, right, on a plant, are all the leaves on the bracts or just the ones by the? they got two
Just
different kind of
the
leaves?
ones around the flower. Let me give you another example. Artichoke, you ever eaten an artichoke, right? You've seen an artichoke. The plant structure. This tiny
At the
way.
base.
Here's the base of the plant. It's got some big leaves here, and then it puts out the artichoke, right? And then it's got, and later it turns purple if it flowers and stuff. So these are still leaves, right? Just regular big leaves, functional in photosynthesis, respiration, transpiration, all the things we said. And then you just look at that artichoke, it's got this kind of like fish scale or armored look to it, right? On the outside. Those are bracts in this one surrounding the flower, which eventually has that like koosh ball thistle effect off the top. So you're eating an artichoke, you're eating thistle bracts, right? So just the floral leaves surrounding the thistle flower. But they're kind of thicker, and you put butter on them, it's pretty good, right? Yeah.
Is that the same with thistles themselves in that genus? They
Mhm.
also bracts?
Yeah, so whether it's like a small thistle we think is a weed, or this one we think is a food, that setup of this piece is bracts surrounding those thin vertical flowers.
Artichokes aren't edible, they flower, right?
That's right. You let it get to flower, it's not gonna taste as good. Because then, right, that storage in those bracts is used to fuel the flowering. So definitely, if you're growing artichokes for food, pick them before it starts to open up.
So not all the bracts are colorful.
Not all bracts are colorful,
Or
but
should we?
there is an obvious distinction in the leaf form here versus this, right? If I zoomed in on one of those, it's like, it's highly dissected, right? And really broad. It should get smaller as I go through the end, but again, I'm not judging your art. So yes, some are green, right? Still
Some
functional.
just- some
Still
are
functional in
there.
photosynthesis, but also functionally different than the rest of the leaves. The role is protecting a bunch of these very skinny, tiny flowers.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's pretty much any leaf that's analogous to a petal, because they're protecting and supporting the flower instead of
That's right.
just being.
That's right, yeah, simply said, thank you.
From all the other bract examples that I've seen, the flower itself doesn't typically have its own petals, it's just the tendrils, right? Is that like throughout most of them? Because like all the examples that I can think of.
Yeah, I would say
just-
most of them. The flower can have its own petals. Oftentimes, when it does, they're really reduced,
Yeah,
right? It's like,
really small.
it's very small. And so, we want to tell somebody we're here, bigger is better, right? Or brighter is better. So, it has this purpose that's gonna then connect us to the next unit on reproduction and flowers. Other questions here? Maybe we can talk about the homework. 4 strategies for water conservation. Any questions about that one? Feel like, yeah, Zach, go ahead.
I didn't see this written down, but I was wondering if it would pass. I said leaf size,
Tell me more.
like I've seen that like on cactuses, isn't there leaves, the spines itself? So it's
Absolutely, right? Way less surface area from, this is cactus spine versus right, deciduous, dogwood leaf or something. Yeah, it's a big difference, absolutely. Julie?
I did dormant season answer, like just the fact that the leaves have the cycle of shade that they don't have to use. Is that?
Absolutely, good thinking, yeah. So they've used time as a way, part of the strategy of conservation. Yep. Just talked about hairs, we just talked about opening and closing stomata, or using sunken stomata, others too.
Veins.
What's that?
Veins.
Veins?
Yeah.
What about?
In there.
What's that?
I put like the xylem along with flow gets encased in sheath throughout the mesophilic contact cell, so it's a way for it to store water in the mesophyll, right, through the veins.
So, yes, so let's be a little more specific. So yeah, xylem is moving water by definition, right? But I think what you're talking about is the bundle sheath around that xylem and phloem bundle in the leaf, right? So that's where it's contained, so that when it has that so this sheath around here, this one doesn't show it so clearly, but I'll find the other one. But the point is then that it's susceptible to drying out from the air surrounding it. By creating this border layer, it holds it in. So that's also right, yeah.
You mentioned thicker epidermis, where one example had like 3 layers of cells versus just one, would be a conservation.
Absolutely, a thick cuticle. Yep. We see that, right, all the time. Or sometimes it's not, it's, more wax. Sometimes it's actual more epidermis cell growth. Combination of the two, yeah. Keep that outside strong, don't let water out, however you can do it. So know those 4, very useful in your understanding how the plant's losing water and thus managing from there. Bracts, we just talked about, number 2. Number 4, I'm gonna skip to 4 if you don't mind, draw and label 2 leaves from the same plant. One in the shade, one in direct sun, so that's gonna be using that specialized leaves, sun, shade, example that I just mentioned, at the beginning today. made sense to? Did the chart seem useful? If so, why?
Well, I had kind of questions. I didn't do it because I didn't want to put the wrong situation, but we are talking about transpiration rate pretty much, right? As far as what the question's asking.
Transpiration rate, that's right. We're talking about water loss. Yeah, I'm talking about the same thing I'm talking about in number number one, in number 3, but now you've got to process, right, how things are affected. So I'm trying to get you to the so what. How am I going to use this, right? You're going to use this because you're going to grow plants in all different environments. So you have to do it something about how they're going to respond based on those conditions. Here I'm giving you, right, the conditions, so you can't choose to manipulate them in a certain way. You're just interpreting that information and making a guess. So here I'm going to say, temps are in blue, humidity is in red. Anytime you see RH, that's relative humidity. So number 1 is 85 and 85. Number 2 is 85 and 10. Number 3 is 85 again and 10. Okay. And then so that's kind of how I conceive of making a chart that way. Chart's not the only way to do it. You could write it all out, but I think that it's cleaner in the mind to compare this one with the next one than to do it all in words. For me.
I guess I was over there.
Stella?
I did like the graph, X and Y axis, is that?
Absolutely, right. More than one way to skin a graph. Okay, so, but to back up a little here, the first part of this is some mutation in this ornamental plant, right? It's been heavily bred from, it was discovered in the jungle somewhere. Now we figured out, hey, this thing can't close stomata. So,
Continuously losing water.
what's that?
Continuously losing water.
Continuously, well, at least the possibility of losing water is always there, always exposed to the outside environment via those stomata, right? So no stomatal closure. You know, this is a setup, right? This would be a big disadvantage to your plants to be in that scenario, but it does get to the point of how the conditions impact that. So, first off, I guess, how do you think this will affect the growth and development of this variety? Which set of conditions, 1, 2, 3, or 4, is the most damaging to this plant? Hold up a number. Let's get a 2s, I see 4s. I see 2s, I see 4s. 2s, I see 4s. 2 is the worst, right? Evan, you were the first to say 2. Why is that?
Because the temperature is high and the relative humidity is low, and so when the temperature is higher and the relative humidity is lower, we're losing water quickly because it has a higher capacity to hold water.
That's right. This is like a desert condition, right? High temperature, low humidity. So high temperature is going to make it lose water fast. Exactly what you're saying. Low humidity is going to make it lose water fast. You put those two together, losing water very fast. So it's going to lose a lot of water fast. Right? So Andrew, you were in the 4 camp. Tell me.
Well, I was saying just because there's literally not enough humidity and it's way too cold for it to do anything. So it sounds like you were saying there that my way of thinking is like the stomata is always open, but if it's too cold and there's not enough water, that stomata is going to close itself, isn't it? The plant's going to pretty much die pretty quickly.
Well, but that's why I circumvented that response by telling you the stomata can't close. Right? That's the whole premise for the question is always open, what do we do now?
Okay.
So, you're right, 10% humidity is very low. It's still going to be, right, somewhat stressed from that. So the corollary, okay, so this is the worst, let's call it. And likewise, the best situation would be lower temp and higher humidity in terms of water loss demand, right? And then whether this one or this one, you can't really be sure unless you need to know exactly how much water is held, right, at this humidity level at each one. But you expect one of these to be better than the other, right? And that would be,
The 80, no, 55, 85.
yeah,
Because we would rather more water accessible.
best here, right? I think it's possible that it's this one is second best, but in either case, we know these two are in the middle. This one's the most damaging and this one's the worst. So that's what we can glean, right, from just raw chart development. And then the reaction would be your description of water loss at that stage. So I'm trying to get at the multiple ways that water can be lost versus the multiple strategies for combating that, right? Opening and closing stomata is one, right? One very good one that all plants are doing. So I took that away, and now we've got to focus on something else about the environment or something else about the plant to think about that effect. So we're getting into the environmental condition overall, and we can figure out exactly, like how much water is held at 85 degrees at 85% humidity versus how much water is held here. Right? We know that colder air holds less water to begin with, so chances are this is really a small amount of water being held here, and this is a relatively large amount of water being held here. But how quickly that is being lost at those two temperatures, we would have to actually run the experiment and see. But we can say that there's some obvious differences when we've got high temp and low humidity versus low temp and high humidity. Those are going to be the two ends, the two extremes in terms of demand on water loss.
Is there a perfect in between?
Is there a perfect in between?
Yeah.
No.
I figured it.
No. That's why stomata open and close. Because they're adjusting all the time. Because it changes, right? Temperature fluctuates throughout the day. Even in controlled environment, if you have some natural light in there, it's going to raise it, then you got to cool it, but now there's wind, right now there's a breeze from the fan or whatever coming over it, so that's cooling it, and that's lowering the humidity, so now everything has to recalibrate. So it's a constant adjustment in reality. But this is just trying to get you to hone in on the effect of either high temperature or high humidity, low temperature, low humidity, or the combination.
I don't know if this is like game in the game or cheating, but it really helped me to look up, like real examples, like if there's any plants that don't use, that don't open and close or.
What did you find?
It's mostly water plants, and so that helped me like dial in which, habitat is best, so.
Aquatic plants are the best examples for that.
There's some terrestrial plants, but it's mostly water.
100%
Andrew?
So I was kind of reading all what you were reading on last night with the water-based plants and stuff, but the thing they were telling me when I was reading on it last night was actually saying like moderate, like 70 to 80, even above a little bit 80 and high humidity was best for plants that have a constantly open stomata. So I was, in my answer, I put that like number one was the best environment for it because like you were saying, that the higher the heat, the better it holds the water with that high humidity.
So,
But if they're moving at the same rate, doesn't it kind of cancel it
but
out?
when you're comparing, so these humidities are equal,
Right.
1 and 3, and the temperature is lower. So we know right away, right, that there's going to be less pressure on the plant to transpire at the lower temperature. So maybe when you're talking about overall growth, right, and not just water loss, something like, if we want to talk about idealized conditions, sure, you can say generalized like 70, and 60% humidity or something. sort of a moderate number here and a little bit warm, that's gonna be good. And the one step back of this that it's all dependent on is what? That has some effect. It's gonna be the moisture level of whatever media it's growing on, right? So independent of the humidity in the room or the temperature, if there's enough water, right, then it can keep losing water as long as it can keep absorbing water.
Right, because that was kind of my thought process, I thought that would be the right answer, it's like, okay, so if it's losing water constantly, having the most amount of moisture around it possible would be the best for it, right?
But the determinant of that, how much water it has available to lose, is dependent on the moisture level in the media, whether it's like outside, right, soil or in a pot or whatever, versus the humidity level tells us more about how much water will be lost just from the leaves. We don't know about what the root is doing really from that.
Now, my other question would be like, so say like you took cuttings, right, they're not rooted, and they're getting all their moisture from humidity, then your humidity rate should be a lot higher.
Great question, yes. That's right. So let's talk about taking a cutting. So tell me more, Dee, is this, so we're talking about a vegetative cutting because you're waiting for it to root. And so this cutting,
It doesn't.
it's a stem cutting here,
Yeah, it doesn't have roots, so it can't absorb water
no roots,
other
right?
than through the leaf.
So the focus, when you're taking any cutting that doesn't have roots, step one,
Never let it dry.
get roots,
Yeah.
right? Gotta get water. In the meantime, the step one for the plant is get roots, right? Until you do that,
The stomata is the only way it's getting water, right?
well, that's how it's losing water
Yeah.
there, but, chances are that stem cutting has maybe 1, 2, 3 leaves at the most, because you want to limit the water loss, right?
Smaller area.
Because it doesn't have roots to get more water. So this is like, it's another form of the question. Here, stomata don't work, here, roots don't work. So all you can manipulate is this, right? So you want to reduce the number of leaves when you're taking that cutting, so there's less water loss, and you want to keep that humidity, right, as high as you can get it. And temperature, what do you want for temperature with that stem cutting with no roots?
Warm, cool.
You're warm and cool. Why warm, Del?
That was me, I said warm.
That was, what was it? Oh, that was right, sorry.
Just so, my thinking is that so it can grow quicker,
So it what?
grows more quick.
But it doesn't have roots, so it can't grow yet.
Well, don't do the like leaves and stuff start coming up.
Yeah, but that's just from whatever energy is left in that stem, right? And that's actually detrimental. Like I just said, you want to have fewer leaves because that's more water loss until you can replace that with uptake from the root system. So cool is correct, not like cold, right? But when we're doing stem cuttings, here in edible propagation or other class, we're talking about 55 to 60 degrees. So not freezing it, right? Survivable temperature, but also relatively cool. That's not going to force more water loss when we're keeping humidity high. So
Are you talking as far as temperature as from, immediate temperature or the
I'm talking about the ambient temperature. The
ambient temperature?
air
Sounds like
temperature.
the media usually
Good
put
point,
on a
though.
heat mat.
What's that?
You usually put cuttings on a heat mat. or
Do,
something.
yes. All right, so here's our little cutting. It's got 2 leaves, right? No roots. Here's this little pot. And yes, if we have the setup, a heat mat, some type of situation where we can get bottom heat in this zone, right, then we would love to make that spot warmer, right? We'd like to make that spot, 75 if we could, because that is going to speed up the rooting, which is gonna then get us water, which is gonna make the whole rest of the story, the same way that I've set up the course material, then go, right? Yeah, so great counterexample, I think that is a good comparison. Julian?
How does that speed to rooting, like increasing the metabolic rate? The roots like they're eating more, growing more, like,
here where we made that cut, we cut it at a node so that we would be at the spot where there's meristematic tissue that can divide. This is a stem, but that meristematic tissue is gonna divide and make a bunch more. When it first does that, we call it a callus. It's spelled like that. And that is like a whitish gray lump of meristematic tissue that signals this is actively growing. If you put that callus now in a moist environment in the media, it's going to become roots, right? It's going to differentiate into root. And so then this process speeds up, the callusing speeds up, and the root production speeds up if temperature is higher, right? And to a point, you don't want it to be, 175, right? The zone here for good rooting would be like 65 to 80 or something like that. So you can facilitate that while you're also reducing water loss in the canopy at the top by keeping the ambient temperature lower, but the humidity in that environment high. Make sense? Yeah, thanks, Dee. I think that really provided the effective comparison to say what's going on from one to the other. Leaves? Other questions? Cool. Bring that leaf homework for Monday or pop it in today. Let's take like 8 minutes now, come back collect all of that assignment, you know, that is, whatever it was, tonight I'll collect leaf ID. I go through them all, and when I put in a grade, if you didn't turn it in, then that gets a 0 at the moment. That doesn't mean you're relegated to 0 forever, right? If you turn it in later, I change the grade, you know, or you resubmit the question that you forgot to answer off the back, and I change the grade. It's just, when I'm doing that, it's to keep up with Moodle, because if I don't enter a grade, then it calculates everything differently. So to keep it clean, for me, I need to have a grade in every slot in order to tell Moodle to treat everything the same way. But know that, you know, I'm not taking off points for late work unless you're like more than 2 weeks out. Your focus should be on completing the assignment, because it's part of building the knowledge and, about that thing. And if that means that it needs to be turned in the next day, you know, no problem. My concern if it gets too late is that things start to stack up and you don't end up actually doing that thing from 2 weeks ago, that then is the next piece to do the one that we're doing this week. And then it's a little bit confusing and it's a little bit harder, and it takes you a little bit longer. So it is definitely worthwhile to keep on track, but maybe you can sleep a little bit easier without the additional stress of like, am I losing points by turning this in Monday versus today? So stick with getting and understanding the information, and then go from there.
That doesn't mean like be super recreational about like, you know, the turn in dates. I'm just saying, like, don't stress yourself out if you don't make it, but don't just be like, oh, screw it, I don't have to do that, you know.
Oh yeah, if you don't do it, then you still lose the points for not doing it. Yeah, I've created the assignments because I think that those are good things to practice, and I encourage you to do them because and sometimes I'm like directly reflecting the lecture material, and sometimes I'm asking, and I've erased it, for like a processing or analysis of the lecture material. And so I see them going together, and I want you to do it, but I'm just saying like, hey, if, you know, whatever happens in life, you had a long night, don't stay up till 3 a.m. doing that assignment, just hand it in the next day. The best thing you could do for your studying for a quiz would be to sleep well the night before, you know. And of course, do that 5 minutes a day that I mentioned early on, you know, distilling the PowerPoint slides into just a few words or a sentence, what the core of that thing is, telling yourself the story from there, to fill in some more information, or to point out which things you don't know, but then just keeping it real short and to the point is then it's easier to like go through your note cards or go through the couple pages of notebook or whatever for literally 5 minutes and keep tabs on your understanding versus trying to like engage with all the content at one time, you know, the night before the like Sunday night, and then being like, oh, what do I do here? That said, if you find yourself in that position, also ask questions. You know, there's still like, you're doing that Sunday night, there's still all of the daylight hours until 1 on Monday to get an answer about that thing and understand it better. Spend an hour, you know, before class or something like that, talking about it with somebody else. And I'm widely available. The weekend, I still will reply within 24 hours to your question. You know, my goal is that it makes sense, and then you can use it to do something like, how do I handle this cutting based on what I now know about how stomata work? That was a great example. So we're moving into flowers. Keep in mind, for the quiz Monday, it's stems and leaves. Right? So this material will show up on the midterm, but not directly there. So again, try to compartmentalize your studying into those two pieces. And that's why you can save the reading, you can save the homework for all after the quiz, if that makes a cleaner break for you, where to put your out of class time, no problem. Just sit here, listen, take notes, and we'll keep going. If you struggle with the sheets, so I also wanted to give this homework with more time because it's longer. It's a series of worksheets I put together from different spots, some labeling that narrows our scope here to the angiosperms. Keep that in mind, right? So, everything we're talking about here falls into that category. Flowering plants, seed encased in some type of fruit, for the most part, and you want to understand what those are. Again, here, like with the leaf ID, don't let your mind get rattled by the words. I want to show you that botanists have come up with an organizational structure for understanding these things, and I want you to know, like, what male flower parts are and female flower parts are, but try to keep it right to the limited, like, here's the 3 male, here's the 4 female, and I'm going to point out, exactly what that is. So now I'm just building up what a flower might look like from the set of possibilities. We had the peduncle is the first part. That's what connects your flower stalk to the stem of the plant. It's the equivalent of the petiole connecting the leaf to the stem. Here it's called the peduncle. And the receptacle is at the tip. Pedicel, right, is another word for the flowers. The stalk individually, right, if there's more than one, you can see the difference. Again, just introducing terms here. Sepals that protect the buds. Calyx is the combination of sepals. Botany does this a lot. If you have one of these things, it's called a sepal, right? You've seen these in different spots. They tend to be like small leaves at the base of the flower. This larger part is like where the stem then transitions into floral tissue here, and this is the ovary right above. And if we have more than one of those, then we call it a calyx of sepals, petals. If we have more than one of those, we say the corolla is the combination of petals. And if you put that all together, all the sepals and all the petals, the calyx and the corolla together, you get the perianth, which is like all the things around that flower on the inside. So again, the introduction to naming these things. Here are the ones that I want you to know. These are the male and female reproductive parts of the flower. And of course, we're only talking about the angiosperms here. The male parts collectively are called the stamen. I think that's a device that's very easy, right? M-E-N, men, literally in there. The male parts are the stamen altogether. The individual parts, and I do want you to know, all the ones that are on this slide, are the filament, that's like the stalk, right, from the base up, that connects to the anther, where the pollen's found, and the pollen itself, right, that's actually the male genetic information that then crosses with the female to give us something new. Sperm cells come from the pollen. That's the stamen. What I've shown you here, for the sake of labeling all these things in one place, is a flower that has male and female parts together in one flower. Not all flowers are like that. The female reproductive parts, collectively, is called either the pistil or the carpel. Interchangeable, same. Some people got opinions about which one you should use. I generally say pistil. You're welcome to use either one. I understand them both, whatever is more memorable to you. So there it goes. Stigma is the sticky part at the top that catches the pollen. Then it goes down the style, that's the stalk here versus the filament in the male side, to the ovary, which contains the egg, or the ovule, that's then pollinated and fertilized by the male pollen, the stigma and the style. And the ovary together is the pistil, the whole female reproductive part of the flower. So that's one that in the homework sheets I'm asking you to label, as again a way to write down and remember. If more is needed, that's a good one to like give yourself a blank and see if you can fill it in, or make a little card and draw a fake flower and see if you can label it. So got, again, we got words for all this stuff. We call a complete flower one that has sepals and petals and male parts and female parts. We call the four worlds, don't worry about that. Incomplete flower, something that doesn't have all those things. Lots of flowers fall into that category. Some are only male, some are only female, some have no sepals. And that means those flowers are, quote, incomplete. Just a term, just ways we can classify things to have an understanding.
So the last question at the bottom, no, right?
The last question is going to be answered on the next
It can be
slide,
incomplete.
and then tell me what the answer is. So this gets us to, I said, not all flowers are like that, having male and female parts in the same flower. We've got two setups. A perfect flower does in fact have male and female, right? Here's stigma style. Can't necessarily make out the ovary, but that's pistil in the middle, stamens on the outside, all together in one flower. That's a perfect flower. Perfectly made, male and female parts together. In contrast, an imperfect flower could be either staminate, male parts only, or pistillate, female parts only. Back to your question. Can an incomplete flower, can a flower be incomplete and perfect? No.
That's complete.
So if it's perfect, it's got male and female parts. Right?
Right.
So thus it has two of these, right? So, but it might not have sepals, say, and then it would be incomplete. But
Perfect but incomplete. How can you be perfect and incomplete?
I know, that's nature for you. Yeah.
It's perfectly incomplete.
I like this one, they sliced right through it, maybe with that little bandsaw, and you can see more clearly male versus female flower, right? Pollen, filament, etc. Here, there's several stigmas, there's not always just one. Not too big ovary, and then fruit develops here. Just again, a way to look at an actual flower after we've been seeing drawing representation, right?
I got a quick question. Might be a weird question, right?
All right.
So like with the pollen, right? Pollen is the female organism, reproduction organism.
Pollen is male.
Huh?
Pollen is
Yeah,
male.
but in order for it to reproduce, it has to hit
That's
the
right.
female organism.
That's right.
My question is all pollen active?
Is all pollen what?
So, this is the question I really have. So you know, like when a man and a woman, all sperm, every sperm might be necessarily valuable. Is it the same way with male pollen to female? Because I know like if pollen touches my female plant, I get seeds. Is it?
So you mean is all pollen viable, or is it all like a Y chromosome like in humans?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, not all pollen's viable.
Okay. That pretty much answers what. A lot of times I try to find the common ground between humans
Absolutely.
and plants.
Right.
And as I'm looking at the reproductive ovaries,
So there's a big difference, and we're jumping the gun a little bit, but no problem to mention. So when human gametes, right, we say that, gametes generally are sex cells, whether that's plant or animal, human, whatever. Human gametes have, so we say that our somatic cells, our regular cells for humans have 46 chromosomes in 23 pairs, right? So our 2N for us equals 46 and N equals 23. So that female X chromosome and that male Y chromosome each have 23, and then when you reproduce, you get a correctly sized 46 in 23 pairs to match this, right? In plants though, it's a lot less clear. Many plant gametes are 2N, so, and then so let's say that's the sometimes it is a single on the male side, excuse me, and you get 3 N. Right? Sometimes it's a single on both, and you get a similar situation here, even though the chromosome number is different. So there's a lot more variability. And that means not only sometimes do you get pollination and fertilization of your plant, sometimes you get something weird. Sometimes you get something different, right? Not like a different species, but a different iteration, because you're mixing a lot more genes at one time.
Kind of like mutation.
Yeah, it's kind of, both can have mutation, but, so here you're always matching up the same, right? It's like, there's 23 pairs, and they're lined up, right, on the female and the male, and you're matching them up. Sometimes here, you're adding a whole column to that, and it just makes everything more complicated. Things, when it comes down to then how the plant actually develops, it can look very different. It can be mutated, right? It might abort very early because of that problem, or it might become some new adaptation that's advantageous from that additional genes. What makes up a perfect flower? Back to my story for today. Male and female reproductive structures in the same flower. That's botanically perfect. That one I want you to know, all 3 of the things on this page, I will definitely ask you about, and they have a very clear so what on how they can be used. Perfect flower. So when you're thinking about your plants, in terms of reproduction, maybe you're saving seed, maybe you're thinking about vegetative propagation and cuttings, whatever you're doing, you want to first know, right, is it one of these? Perfect. Yes or no? See? No. So where is that thing? And then you need to know, is it self-fertile? Can it cross-pollinate? Because there's a combination. You can have a perfect flower with male and female parts in the same flower, but they don't pollinate one another. There has to be some outcrossing. You can also have ones that absolutely pollinate right inside that same flower. So there's 2 pieces to the puzzle. The first one I want to address is just the nomenclature of what you see. Both together is perfect. If you have male and female structures on the same plant, but in, then it's called monoecious. So as in mono one, monoculture, monocrop, whatever, one plant with male and female parts. So you've got monoecious,
Which are perfect flowers, right?
well, some monoecious plants are perfect, because by definition, if they're in the same flower, they're on the same plant, right? However, there's a subset of monoecious plants which have female and male flowers separate on the same plant. Exactly, like the cucurbits. That's the example I was going to give, because I see that one right in the farm. Zucchini, cucumber, squash, whatever. You see same plants, obviously male and obviously female flowers, right? Same plant, so they are monoecious, but they are not perfect. So that's one spot that I'm going to ask you about, and it's an easy one to trip up. All perfect flowers are monoecious. They're all on the same plant. But not all monoecious flowers are perfect. Okay?
But can you tell me, I missed why they're not perfect?
So this was we just said, cucumber, any cucurbit, squash, right? If they have male and female flowers on the same plant, but not in the same flower. Okay?
Oh.
And that's what perfect is, right? In the same flower.
You're saying 2 different flowers on the same plant.
That's right.
I got 1, 3.
That's right.
I get it.
And then there's a third category, not on the same plant at all, and that's dioecious, two parts to it, and so that's like, you need a male and you need a female. For inedible propagation, we propagate kiwis. We have a male kiwi and a female kiwi, separate individual. And if you want to successfully grow the female and get the fruits, you need a male within a few hundred feet. So that's a dioecious crop because they're on separate plants. Male flowers on one plant, female flowers on the other plant.
The majority of plants are which category? Y'all know.
I don't know the numbers. I think that the majority, I think a lot of plants that humans come in contact with through food are, require pollination and fall in either perfect or monoecious. Not so many that need to cross from a totally different plant. But that's because of, right, human co-evolution where we're like, it's easier, right, if it's all right here. We don't have to depend on something outside, then we can control all the conditions. But I don't know, just like the total species breakdown. So check that one out, perfect, monoecious, dioecious, and keep this in mind. Monoecious is an umbrella term, perfect falls under that, and there's this other group that are on that plant, but male and female flowers separate.
Still a little confused on complete, so that's when it has both male and female, it might be missing some parts, and then perfect is it has all the parts? And what's the complete?
No, perfect has male and female parts together in the same flower. Here, right? And right here. And monoecious is this one. You can see they're connected to the same plant, but this one's male and this one's female.
Is monoecious complete? Doing the same thing?
No.
I would expect.
Yeah, take complete out of the question.
No, yeah, I'm still confused from back when we were talking about.
So if it doesn't have like, if it doesn't have one of the other things, so you can have a flower with male and female parts, that's a perfect flower, but if it don't have sepals, then it's incomplete.
Yeah, take that out of the calculation here. I don't think that's overall that important of a distinction here. We're just talking about how these appear, numbers 3 and 4, with male and female reproductive parts. So perfect again, they're in the same flower, by definition then on the same plant. But some are on the same plant in separate flowers, like this, even though they're right next to each other. And some are on totally different plants of the same species. And we call these flowers inflorescences, an arrangement of a group or cluster of flowers. If it's not just one thing, then we call it inflorescence if there's more than one. And the shape is directly connected to pollination. We've got many name types of these things. Again, I'm going to show you examples. Don't get caught up there. Just keep with the connection between the form and the function of pollination. So some things are a single flower at the top. Some things are a spike, right? They're right on the stalk. A raceme is like a spike, except it has these little stalks, the peduncles, and then as you get more branched, a leather manifold. Again, just examples to show you the diversity of what's out there, and if you're getting into ID, especially if you're getting into ID in grass species, then this can become more important. Do you know an inflorescence is like flowers? Other options, examples, corms, cymes, umbels, you've heard of, and it says something about corms, right, form from the outside in, cymes from the inside out, umbels, right, all come from the same spot. But just know that these are different names for the inflorescences. That's all I'm looking at. Oh, where are we going here? One button I hit, but the wrong one. Pardon me. Here we go. Next one. So then, we want to talk about some of the ID of the general flower. So I picked picked out here for you, something from what once was the composite family. It's now grouped with the asters and Asteraceae, chrysanthemum, the millis. Also, sunflower has the same type of look. Right? This is the same thing that I have on the first slide. So there's two sets of flowers here. We got the rays on the outside, the discs in the middle. They're connected to the receptacle. You notice a little bract here. That's a leaf. So just to get the idea that there's really a diversity of these inflorescences. So when we're looking at flowers, by knowing the names of things, we can really drill down to specifically what family that thing is in based on how it looks. Catkins, right?
Is the sepal the same as the bract?
Say what?
Is the sepal the same as the bract?
Is sepal the same as a bract? They often appear in what seems to be a similar spot. A bract is a leaf. So it came out of a node right below the flower. And a sepal is part of the flower. So no nodes in that case on the sepal, right? Although sometimes it's hard to tell because they often appear right here, right? Sometimes what we see for the sepal though is like it's either right here where it connects to the stem, or it's right here where this is supposed to be a flower. But yeah, really, I think the point is just recognizing the diversity and then keeping in mind, like, stems produce nodes, right? Roots don't, flowers don't. And just keep it there. We got catkins, right? Again, other things, other labels for flowers, right? These are, alders, for example. Grasses are really complicated, and they have their own set of ID features and nomenclature. Because of that complexity, I'm not going to ask you about any of that. I just want to get the stage set for the variety of flowers that are out there. And then I'm going to start next time here with how we make the next generation of things from that diversity of flower types that are out there. What's that?
We're gonna talk about the birds and the bees.
Talk about the birds and bees. First thing Monday.
I don't know about this, Planet ID Club.
I'm following you.
Huh?
I'm following you again.
Damn.
I am so tired. I'm right with you. I'm so tired. Exhausted.
I'm like, do I wanna call them quiz? I'm like, if I'm not gonna pass it, it's kind of stupid. Just take the L. It's just a long time, man. Like, I gotta be here till 6, then till 8:30.
That's why I'm gonna take off for a while. I have Spanish. That's Spanish. And then I'm gonna take off for a while.
I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna
try.
take off at 3 for the
Oh, no?
go to the bar.
I'll be the last when I'm out of this school.
See you in 2 weeks.
I think not freaking out is okay to, like you just said, like, don't stay until 3 a.m. Don't, losing sleep just makes things worse.
Am I? I'm taking you to Freddie.
Yeah, just.
I was not feeling good that.
See you, Chris.
Good weekend.
I went with
I think, Colleen, is that you?
What?
Oh, are you recording with that?
No, no, she is.
Is it Kasha? Okay.
Yeah.
How's that? I'm still trying to figure out how I'm gonna do the last 3 weeks. If I'm able to get like the last recording.
You can definitely submit stuff online. And you can also take, if there's a quiz in there or the final completed via email.
Okay.
Like we'll set up like a specific time, I'll send you it, fill it in, save a copy, email
Okay.
that.
Great.
And then as far as the lecture material, maybe ask the questions, you can share that.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm not set up to record it all yet.
Thank you.
Yeah. I am getting ready to go to my office. Where are you going?
Alright, last one, I'll close that door.
I do, but I don't have nothing in my contract. Does he have Venmo? I didn't send Venmo to Kesha app. I didn't, 'cause, yeah, Rachel does it, but I don't know how to. I've been, who does? Okay, so. Fucking right now, shut up, fucking, he needs to write a question for me. Tell him to request $25.
And so, I have a YouTube account and I was going to just upload it onto YouTube and then post the links into the announcements.
And go to Cash App and find me.
I missed one day of class, and I was like, I can't deal with that ever again. With no recorded lecture.
I'm not Cash App, the Venmo.
Oh, sorry, I'm Claire.
Claire, nice to meet you.
Congratulations again. Thank you.
So exciting.
I have no idea what we're in for, but I'm excited.
Yeah.